All right, so hey there, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. If you have any issues, please feel free to throw it in the chat as we go along here. My name is Billy Kyle. I'm going to be the moderator here for this session for Beyond the Visual Line of Sight operations, large-scale operations. We're going to talk about the role of UTM, FTS, and DAA. So I've been a drone pilot now for about 8 years. I do a lot of construction photography, real estate photography. So I'm really the end user here personally, as we'll kind of talk about here. I'm looking forward to being able to integrate BVLOS into my own operations, being able to service my clients that are construction based, that need consistent visits, so that I'm able to put a dock on site, basically set and forget, so that I don't have to make the trip out there. So BVLOS is something that I'm looking forward to taking advantage of in the future as it becomes a little bit easier to get a hold of. So on stage here with me, I have David from Matrix Space. I've got Josh from AVSS. I have John from Aloft and Havish from Flightbase. So David, do you want to go ahead and take a chance to introduce yourself first?
Sure. My name is David Cameron. I'm a field engineer with Matrix Space, light on the engineer side. I am come from law enforcement, 33 years in law enforcement, where I have run and created both UAS and DFR programs, and currently running a no VO program using airspace detection for the visual observer and matrix space radar, along with optical sensors to cover that, as well as created other waivers in this field. So.
Awesome. And Josh, how about you?
Hey everyone, my name is Josh Odden. I'm the CEO of AVSS. We build parachute recovery systems, flight termination systems. We're a Canadian company that sells a product around the world and has been working with Flightbase, I think, since 2020, and is part of the DJI ecosystem and build basically regulatory compliant parachute systems. I think that's one thing that our strong suit is understanding the regulations, meeting the different rules in Europe, Canada, US, different markets, and complying.
Awesome. And John, how about yourself?
Cool. Thanks, Billy. I'm John Hegerness, the CEO and founder of Aloft. I started the company about 10 years ago, and we're recently announced our pending acquisition with Unusual Machines. But I think what isn't changing is really our mission. How do we enable flight? How do we help large enterprises or folks like you, Billy, go fly and do that BVLOS? So excited to share our learnings and experiences so far.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been a long time Aloft user, so thanks to you guys for making some awesome software. And to wrap it up, Havish, how about yourself?
Hey guys, thanks Billy. So I'm one of the product managers here at Flightbase. I've been in the drone industry for about 6 years now. And from the beginning, our mission has been to enable BVLOS and to enable as much automated drone flights and, explore the third dimension as much as possible. So we are dedicated on our path to ensuring building a platform which brings all of these different parts of the drone industry together. And it is providing the scalable and safe and regulatory compliant solution to all our customers.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we have a great panel here for you. I think that there's an awesome mixture of people here, people that are actually flying, people that are building hardware, people that are building software. So really a lot of great leaders here in the BVLOS space. David, since we started with you with the introduction, why don't we spin it over to you? I've got to say that ground radar, things like that, are something that I never really thought were a necessity for BVLOS drone flights, right? So I guess I want to dig in a little bit about how first responders are currently utilizing these sensors, like how they're supporting emergency response operations with your products.
Sure. I think, the first thing to unpack there is, as DFR operations go, we're responding to emergency calls every day, kind of utilizing resources more logically. But with a lot of DFR programs, you have a human visual observer on the roof. So you've got making a one-person operation, a two-person operation, which doesn't necessarily use those resources as best they can. So investing in sensors, radar sensors, optical sensors, even acoustic, though that's not my area of expertise. You're allowing agencies to remove that human visual observer and turn it into a true one-person operation to respond to calls and give that critical pre-arrival information.
Great. And so these sensors that you're developing, is it looking for manned aircraft? Is it looking for other drones? Like what exactly are you looking for in the airspace?
So the main concern for the FAA is general aviation aircraft entering the area of your drone operations. So it's making that safeguard, both whether like in our system with Campbell PD that I still am associated with, it is an optical and radar system. The optical and radar work together during the day, but at nighttime, optical systems, not all optical systems, but optical systems generally don't, like the human eye, don't see as well at night. There's not a good depth perception with optical systems in general. That's where the radar comes in it. Either poor or hazy weather where you can still fly by FAA regulations, but it's still not the clearest out. Optical systems won't work as well. So you have this radar to cover nighttime and looking for these non-cooperative aircraft during poor weather conditions or nighttime conditions to allow for 24/7 operations.
Great. That's awesome. And backstage, we're talking about how you're integrating with AVSS's parachute as well. So how do you find yourself integrating using the radar and the parachute?
So it's almost two different parts of a waiver. That would be under Part 107, where the requirement is to have a parachute for flying over people and flying over vehicles. I think it's a great insurance policy, whether you're doing Part 91 or Part 107, to have that extra. We've had incidents in the past since we've had our program, and nothing has come of them. Though having the extra insurance of having a parachute on it would be great. The integration part comes where, integrating our radar into, or other radar sensor systems into other software or GUIs, like Aloft. We're in talks with Aloft right now to integrate our radar system into their overall airspace awareness platform. And we're really looking forward to doing that and providing that to customers.
Great. That's awesome. Yeah, it's cool how all of you guys up on stage here are kind of integrating together to make this happen. So Josh, why don't we spin over to you? You and I have done a lot of work together, flying drones with parachutes on top of them. I think recently with the ability to now fly over people without a waiver, which I think is great. But let's talk about, and that's just for specific drones. I know you like to be specific about that. So like with the Mavic 3 Enterprise, we were able to fly over people without a waiver. So why don't we talk about a couple different markets here, Josh, right? We talk about the United States and Europe. What are some differences that you see when it comes to beyond a visual line of sight operations between the two different markets?
Yeah, so what we're seeing in like the North American versus European context is nuance on which tech you're using, segregated flight termination systems, C6 ratings, for example, in Europe. In the US, we're seeing parachutes even being considered as that flight termination system to prevent a flyaway if you're in congested airspace, certain locations. In Canada, it's a little bit different where we don't have ADS-B on all the aircraft, so it's a little bit of a nuance, and we're moving into rules this year that haven't been announced yet, but the proposed rules. And what we're seeing is the parachute is really a ground risk item, whereas when we think of BVLOS, a lot of the concern too is the flight termination system requirement. However, we also see regulators considering the human factor. If you've got a $50,000 piece of equipment and you've got the flight termination system, are you really going to activate it if you know your $50,000 is going to smash to the ground? And that's where we're seeing people also suggest parachutes, again, on that human factor side. We're also seeing in the market some regulatory differences on testing and on compliance. Like our company, what we do is we focus on the most strictest rules for ops over people with like the FAA. And then from that, it kind of gives us this trickle down effect to other markets. And so when I think you're seeing products in market, there's a lot of end users in Europe who are pissed off on the rules related to MOC 2511, but ultimately it's that enabling piece that there's nuance on how it's been designed and there's nuance on how it works in different markets. And yeah, I still see in the market, people want BVLOS, but I don't know if all the end users, all the operators that want it understand all the full stack, the full different pieces that you need to have, whether it's radar, fleet management, control, all these elements, pre-flight checks, cybersecurity, and it's kind of a never-ending moving game.
Sure. Speaking of means of compliance, what is the difference between MOC 2511 and 2512?
So your MOC 2511 is a European construct of enhanced containment. There's alt MOCs as well, and this is your air risk. So, Europe's dense. There's a lot of countries with a lot of airports. Ireland's one, Switzerland's one, where you see a lot of flights in congested airspace because of, that's where the population is. That's where people live. And, we all love Ryanair and EasyJet because you can fly from all these small airports. But for the drone operator, all these tiny airports creates the need for the MOC 2511. I'm sure the flight-based guys have seen this a lot in the requirements. And then the MOC 2512 is a ground risk. So this is your medium robustness. This is your flight over people, populated area, more in line with what we're doing in the US and Canada as far as category drones. Not as strict. MOC 2512 in Europe is definitely, in my opinion, you've got two sides of it. You've got the ASTM standard, go deploy 45 times, prove it works. But then you have this, in my opinion, a very watered down BS approach of two flight tests and more is up to you. And I think this is one thing with the nuances in the regulations where you've had probably too many soft views and you've got these two extremes. So not all things are equal, I guess, in the nuances.
Cool. Awesome. Now, I know that you mentioned fleet management software, which, Havish, I'll spin it over to you. You're obviously from FlightBase, who's putting on this great webinar today. So appreciate you jumping in here, probably from a busy schedule and talking to us. Now, I was reading on your website about, being able to use FlightBase, being able to take advantage of a waiver that you guys have for beyond visual line of sight. So you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
So what we have is that in every region that we're working with, we basically have a regulatory expert panel where we have the people who are experts in that particular region's regulatory rules and compliances. They work with FlightBase, they understand the FlightBase system, and they then introduce the FlightBase system into the waivers, which are then submitted by our customers. So they figure out what is the setup and what is the operational system of the customer, and they integrate the FlightBase capabilities and its how the user's ConOps is going to be with the FlightBase into their waivers, and that is how they're able to get waivers with FlightBase. So we are running this BVLOS assistance programs currently all over the world, and we have these experts in Europe, we have them in the US, we have them in other regions as well to really help people quickly complete their waivers and get flying with BVLOS.
That's awesome. Now, this is maybe more of a personal question. Maybe you can preach to some of the people here that are watching that are interested in your software. What differs your software between something like DJI's Flight Hub, right? So if I buy one of these docks and it just comes with the software, what's something different that you guys are offering, or how does your product stand out amongst maybe something that just comes with the drone, it comes with the dock that I purchase?
Right. So I think the biggest thing is that it brings all of you guys together. That is the main USP, right? So the integrations that we provide on FlightBase, they are able to integrate what the radars and the systems that Matrix Space provides today, that David was talking about. It also has integrations with the parachutes, and in the future, we are also going to try and build integrations with UTMs and also the regulatory approval systems like what ALOFT provides. So, and if you think about it, all of these are systems that are sometimes very specific to each region. So it's not like if you create integration with one of these systems, you're good for all over the world. You need them to be there for each and every region. And to bring all of these systems together, you need a software that is built in such a way, the platform is built in such a way that allows for these integrations. So I think that is where the strength is. Like if you were to start with Flight Hub, you may have to go around a lot of bottlenecks where you're not able to show to your regulatory authorities that you have one system where everything is integrated and you're able to operate from that. Versus if you were to start with FlightBase, then you could very easily show that whatever they want is everything is at the same place. So it's a completely well-rounded system. So I think that is the biggest advantage of using something
cool
like FlightBase.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, being able to easily get waivers through your software is definitely awesome for beyond visual line of sight. John, it kind of spins me over to you with the Loft. I love using your app, being able to just get instant airspace approval. It's obviously made flying near airports way easier. I remember the days where you'd call the tower before you'd fly, right? Way before Lank came around. So with how easy it is to just jump on the app and get airspace approval. Do you see that potentially happening in the future for other approvals, like for flight over people or beyond visual line of sight flight?
I hope so. I mean, that's what we're building to. I think you probably remember, we got controlled airspace authorizations, but then you couldn't fly at night, right? And now that's bundled in. You don't have to get a waiver to fly at night. That's included. We let you know, hey, what do you need? And you can still get your authorization and fly at night. So it makes sense that these continue to kind of build on itself. I'd say the one thing that I'd say are working towards the most regarding BVLOS is how do we move from kind of this champion operator mentality to more of a service provider mentality, right? So a lot of the quayside operations, for example, it's all about, we need all these operators to come together, but it really should bubble up to the USS or the provider of those services. So I think that's where you get scale. That's where you can bring in a lot of different operators, right? There's no path to onboard 10,000 operators into a quayside, right? But if you do that at the provider level, at the USS level, then you get all of these authorized services. So we're trying to do that where the regulators are coming in at the federal level, but there's a lot of stuff like with SGI where we made it one click to submit that, right? Like even painful stuff that isn't quite fully digital. How do we just keep making that easier ultimately so you can fly more?
Yeah, I think that it's again great being able to jump on the app, get those instant approvals, and you made a really good point about the night flight just being bundled in. So, how that looks in the future, I guess it's up to the lawmakers to decide. All right, so David, how about we spin around back to you? We talked a little bit about how first responders are utilizing these different sensors. How do you see the infrastructure that cities are implementing enhancing first responders' capabilities?
Well, I'm actually looking at it in two ways. One, other enhancing other or allowing other first responder agencies to use infrastructure that's already there. Like if one agency puts in and invests in infrastructure, allowing other agencies to be able to tap into that infrastructure to allow their agencies to do work. But also that larger, how does that factor into a larger UTM infrastructure? And in my mind, if the public is paying for airspace awareness to allow drone operations, shouldn't they be able to also allow that to be able to be melded into a larger UTM for package delivery, for air taxis? Since the infrastructure is already there, why not use it for public good and allow it to be mixed in with a larger UTM infrastructure? So I'm looking at it both ways in that I guess really that's my thoughts on the usage of the sensors, because it's just enabling those emergency operations. But why not be able to enable commercial operations for the public good, since the investment has already been made?
Sure. Now, if you're going to be using radar for airspace monitoring, what are some of the key differences between radio navigation and radio location? And also, maybe if you want to elaborate on that, what are some of the required approvals that are required from regulatory bodies, FCC, ISED, maybe some other agencies as well?
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't, or a lot of agencies don't quite do their due diligence to really look into, what are they going to need for waivers, or what are they going to need for approvals? Sure, you're going to go to the FAA for your overall approval, but if you're looking at using radar, there's always, in all approvals, there's going to be some FCC component, whether it's because of the drone is involved or whatever, but a lot of those are worked in under what's called Part 15, where you don't need licenses for the drones to fly and such, the command and control links. But when it comes to radar, there are not additional waivers, but additional authorizations you need to get, because a DFR operation by nature is under the FCC rules 47 CFR Part 87 is a radio navigation use case. So you're enabling an aircraft to fly your own drone. You're monitoring the sky to enable the safe flight of your drone. That by nature is a radio navigation application. And if you read some of the COAs that have just come out, or the certificates of authorization from the FAA, they're very specific about the telecommunications section, that that any of those ground-based sensors are certified as a Part 87 radio navigation a piece of equipment, right? They can't be experimental. You can run under an experimental transmitting license, but the equipment itself has to have an equipment authorization for radio navigation, or some sort of a special waiver that says they can do it outside of their normal certification. Now, radio location, which is that same CFR 47, it's Part 90, is radio location. A good example of that is, I just want to go out and I want to do counter UAS, and I want to search for drones, or I want to put it on a perimeter for perimeter security for ground targets to notify me. The radars don't change, in most part. Like our radar wouldn't change the frequency, wouldn't change the power. It's the same thing, piece of equipment, but it's the use case. The use case there is radio location. And currently you can't use a radar that's only certified for radio location to do airspace detection for radio navigation. So it's those things that, I encourage, whether it's a commercial operation or first responder operation, do your due diligence with your company that you're working with or vendor, and ask them, can you show me your equipment authorizations for the use case that you want? Again, if you're enabling BVLOS for drones, that's going to be a radio navigation specific use case.
Awesome. Perfect. Josh, spinning it over to you. What do you think when people are looking to add a parachute to the drone that they're flying, that somebody might forget to check when they're evaluating maybe brand or maybe type of parachute that they need? And then maybe also, if you want to spin off from there, when using a drone for BVLOS, what do you find, are some use cases for your parachute and drone to be used for BVLOS?
Yeah, so I think when people are looking at parachutes or any payloads, I think attaching to drones, there's the task of forgetting to do the math. The drones, if such as like the Dock 2, you've got about 200 grams of available payload. So people start tacking on stuff, whether it's lights, whether it's not so much, but we see sometimes remote ID, SATCOM modules, parachutes, lights, speakers. They just start kind of piling on. And the analogy I use is like when you get on a plane, I don't think you're allowed to take off when you're 50% above the maximum takeoff weight. And I know this is a topic in the drone industry where there's a group of people that will argue, well, it doesn't matter, it's not a certified aircraft. But there's languages that you look at the manufacturer, like DJI, they'll say, okay, if you exceed the maximum takeoff weight, don't do that, you'll void warranty. Then there's the insurance stakeholders, there's the lawyers, there's the SOPs in your municipality or your state, provincial organizations. They want to know you're flying safely. And if the drone says this is the maximum takeoff weight, that's how we treat it. We've had discussions asking for more weight on different drones. And a lot of times it's like, hey, this is why we said it. And there's always safety factors built in. But we're seeing companies sell products because they chose not to redesign it. They chose not to comply. And this is, I think, a flaw in the ASTM standard where you're validating that it works, but you're not being told to go validate that you're not in excess of the MACO. Overall, I think this is a topic that some CAAs are more particular about than others. But I think ultimately it's the end user that's going to deal with that conversation because, you bought a product and you attached it, you're the pilot in command, and you're the responsible party. But I think as a company like ours, it's like we have a burden to go and make sure that we sell things that are below that and we don't set our customers up and hopefully the market rewards us. So that's something that I think just understanding what you can put on and how much extra crap you can put on a drone to fly it in your missions, and making sure that, sometimes just you can't put on a kilogram of stuff on a Mavic. That it is what it is. I think the thing is, when we're looking at BVLOS use cases, a lot of times the parachute is for ground risk, and that's for your urban use cases, your highly populated areas. Unless, again, we go back to that flight termination conversation. We'll have some products announced later this year where we're offering just a flight termination system. Historically, we didn't do that. We always thought it was weird that you're going to kill your drone mid-flight. But, sometimes people just want that piece so that they can add other products. But ultimately, that's where the parachute recovery system, flight termination systems functionalities come into place.
Cool. Just a personal question. I'm thinking, I know that some of these drones made by DJI have almost a flight termination system built in, where you put the sticks in a specific manner and it kills the motors. Does that not qualify? You need an external FTS?
Yeah, and external is terminology. Again, you're used to this. It's very picky. External FTS is one method, Europe AirRIS, but it needs to be able to shut down the motors without operator intervention. So CSC maneuver is an operator seeing a drone saying, oh crap, it's falling out of the sky or something's going wonky. Again, human factor wise, response time wise, like I remember 2017, 2018 doing DJI Inspire 1 flights without an FTS, trying to do the CSC maneuver. And I have seen too many Inspire flights fall out of this, DJI inspired drones fall out of the sky because of those CSC maneuver timing issues. So and there's parachute companies that will argue, no, you can just do the CSC maneuver, but it's like, no, you're just trying to sell a hobby product, do all the steps. There's a process here. Stop cutting corners. So yeah, I have a specific opinion, I guess, on that topic.
I remember a video that came out when the first Mavic Pro came out of some guy doing that, and it fell from the sky, and then he restarted the motors in midair. And that was like one of the craziest videos about that drone when it came out. So figured I would.
Yeah,
who?
Yeah, no, that's a cool one, right? But that's ultimately, it's like, yeah, if any pilot wants to do CSC for FTS, I don't think you should be a pilot. I'm going to go with that.
Well, luckily, I've never had to use the CSC or CCS. I don't even know what it's called because I've never had to use it. Guys, we have some good questions already in the Q&A. If you have any questions you're watching here, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A section. Towards the end of this webinar, we'll kind of take a pause, go through those questions, and I'll divvy them up to who I think would be best to answer them. So Javish, why don't we flip it over to you? Something that you guys tout is your reliability within the flight-based software, which I think is huge, because I've had jobs where, unrelated to drones, I've set up time-lapse cameras from afar, and I never know if that time-lapse camera is taking photos when I'm gone, right? So I could show up and the SD card might be empty. And when I kind of relate this back to flying drones, I would hate to have a dock that's set up 1,000 miles away. I get on site, I set it up, I go back home, I get back to the office, and I'm getting an error. I'm getting some sort of issue. And of course, integrating software is probably just one phase of this, because the hardware has to be good as well. But what are some of the things that you guys have implemented in your software to make sure that troubleshooting can be done from afar rather than having to be done right there on site?
That's a great question, really, because we have a lot of customers whose docks are more than 1,000 kilometers away from where they actually commanded, and they have to take a flight to actually get to the place to just even look at the dock sometimes, and book a hotel, take a flight, then stay there, maybe even arrange for travel. So yeah, they absolutely need good systems which are able to replace all of that. So it starts from the moment you actually get the dock to the site. So it starts with how you are setting it up. Most of the issues that happen are when people improperly set up the dock. So when I say they improperly set up the dock, I mean like they place it in a wrong location. They don't configure the safe landing locations properly. They don't configure the internet sometimes properly, or the power systems. So what we have is that we have at FlightBase we have the Flight Academy. So this is built by our solution engineers who have worked with so many of our customers and partners, and they know all the common mistakes that people make when they're at the site setting up the dock. So that Flight Academy course is especially to help people set up the dock in such a way that they probably would not have to visit it again. So it starts from that step, which is how well are you helping people set up their systems in the first go. Other than that, once everything is set up, the next thing is how do you observe your system? So for observing the systems, the current flight-based dashboard provides you visibility about how many battery cycles are done with your batteries, how much flight time your drone has flown, so that you can decide upon when you want to go and replace the drone or go for maintenance. That again prevents surprises, but which is not desirable in any operation. It has HMS visibility, so any diagnostics information that the drone is throwing up or the dock is throwing up, that would be visible to you wherever you are in the world. And other than that, if you actually had to debug the system, like for example, you had to pull logs or you wanted to upgrade your firmware, all of that is available through the flight-based dashboard. So you can do it remotely. You don't need to go on site. So these are some of the some of the things which really help people to remotely, manage the systems without actually going on site. Other than that, we just ensure that the flight-based system itself is compatible with field conditions. Like some of the field conditions that we see is people using Starlink for as their primary network, or sometimes even 4G. So it is extremely important that we are 100% sure that the flight-based system can work very well with Starlink, whether it is video streaming or controls or anything like that. So we ensure that our system is well tested with Starlink. Other than that, we also provide CCTV integrations. Actually, not right now. We are going to be releasing it with the next AIR updates. So some customers, what they prefer is that around their dock site, they have a CCTV camera which is watching over the whole site from like a third person point of view. It gives them visibility of their fence around the dock, about whether it's breached, it's not breached, and the conditions at the site. So providing that integration for that again gives you so much visibility into the situation that you can make a lot of decisions remotely without having to actually go there and check out the system.
That's awesome. That's huge. And yeah, I can only imagine all the logistics that have to go into place to get there to just unplug it and plug it back in, right? To do a restart of the system. I can only imagine that there's a lot of time wasted and spent. Hey, John, can we talk about Part 108? Yeah, you have any information about Part 108 at all? Do you care to elaborate on it, maybe?
The long-awaited Part 108.
Well, it's funny because I think I first remember it starting as a joke, and now it's actually a thing, right?
It's a thing. I think we'll see when it comes to be. I think the parts that are most exciting is being able to fly BVLOS by rule and get out of the waiver world that we're in. We had some calls just this morning with a customer who's getting waivers to fly BVLOS. They need a lot of the UTM integrations that we have for aircraft tracking and other things, but you're still having to get a waiver, right? And I think the objective with Part 108 is just like 107, follow these rules, go fly commercially. 108, follow these rules, go fly BVLOS. And a lot of that is aircraft. I think a lot of the sensor and safety mitigations that folks on this panel have discussed, but then also what are the services that you can use to operate compliantly from a software perspective as well. And I'm hopeful that we're getting closer, right? I was kind of unfortunately surprised the other day when I realized that the BVLOS ARC came out 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And we're still a ways from a rule, but I think with how the DOT and the FAA are starting to move forward, it's really recognizing that we need to enable this, right? Like, and I think the fact that the DOT is getting more involved is helpful, because this is a more holistic view on all transportation. And I think the role of drones, if purely looked at the airspace, has its effects with traditional aviation. But when you look at total transportation, this affects traffic, this affects road congestion and all those other costs. So there's a lot of, I think, industry demand and economic demand and reasons to move this forward. So I look forward to the day when Billy Kyle, Part 108 operator, is there, and you can have electronic observers, right? Not visual observers, but yeah, let's log on and see what aircraft are nearby, get alerts based on radar that something is encroaching, right? And I think what's really interesting is, kind of where Aloft sits, we start to see a lot of early signals. And this, has happened over the years in terms of different trends, what people want. I'd say what's really been interesting recently is that we'll have government users to commercial, purely commercial type operators that are saying, hey, I want to monitor this space and be alerted if a drone enters it, right? And as we remove humans and visual eyeballs, you start to need those kind of electronic signals, and whether that's for monitoring counter UAS or operationally for safety, starting to have those sort of electronic observers is going to be really critical.
Yeah, I just recently did the Eagles parade, was flying the drone, and it
Nice.
was pretty difficult because there were so many aircraft in the air, police helicopters, news helicopters. The police helicopter was flying at 150 feet. I was tracking him on flight radar as he was flying around, and it was crazy. So even in that scenario where I'm only flying the drone a couple hundred feet away from myself, still would have been great to have something to detect these other manned aircraft, because it was fairly congested. So what's great about everyone on the panel here? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I was going to say that's where I think having that common operating picture starts to be so useful, right? And it's really not drone to drone, it's aviation as a whole, right? That's what we need to solve for.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, kind of wrapping up with the questions here, everybody on the panel here is working together to try to enable a BVLOS future. Do any of you guys have anything else that you want to add? You guys want to ask each other questions? Is there anything else before we move on to some of the questions we have here from people watching?
Let's hear some questions.
Silence means no. Okay, so we have so far 4 questions. Again, if you guys have any questions, you've been listening along, please feel free to drop them over there in the Q&A section. We've got about 7 minutes to wrap this up. So the first question is regarding sensors, specifically light time of flight sensors like LiDAR or rangefinder. Is it possible to avoid them in a drone due to the environment? BVLOS flights where the drone is in direct contact with the sun, this kind of sensors fail. So yeah, I can attest that I've flown my drone just, going from point A to point B, and it'll throw the brakes on because of the sensors. Usually the way that I get around that is turning the sensors off. So, I mean, Havish, maybe throwing this over to you, right? Like, would it be possible with a low sun angle, if I want to fly something later in the day through the software, could I turn off the sensors for a flight if I needed to?
Yeah, absolutely. These controls are already provided in the APIs that we integrate with for especially the DJI drones that we tend to work with. So yeah, if let us say if you're getting those braking behaviors, then there's just a toggle. You can just go switch it off and you should be able to continue the flight. At the same time, even though the switch toggle is off, you would still be able to get the radar, the information about where the obstacles are. So you can still make a decision, but visually, that's all. The system would not break automatically.
Sure, yeah. And John, I guess asking you, if we're looking at Part 108, and if one of the things to fly under Part 108 is having obstacle avoidance enabled, what would you do in that scenario? Would you be able to turn off obstacle avoidance if you're in a scenario where the drone couldn't move, or would that be against rules and regs?
I know, we'll have to see what those regs look like. I think anything that's practical and for safety makes sense, right? And so how do we blend performance rules that aren't prescriptive and solve for true risk mitigations that matter, and operationally what's needed for safety and compliance?
Sure. Now let's see. The next question we have here seems a little bit general. It says, what sources for drone design would you recommend in order to make the safest drone for beyond visual line of sight flights? I think we already have pretty safe drones right now. I think that most of the drones that are being made are pretty good. Of course, you look at some of the people on the panel here, you'll have to add some third-party accessories in order to make it, a legal beyond a visual line of sight drone. But I think that what we have now with, generally smaller drones that are made of plastic with sensors around them, I think that we're pretty much on the right track with some of the different, manufacturers that are making drones. Dave, I think that this is probably a good question for you. Which tethered drone system do you recommend for public safety to monitor during an event like a festival or a parade near a stadium? I think personally, I've heard of PhotoKite. Do you have any other recommendations?
No, not really. I mean, I know Hoverfly, but they're more of a DoD contractor, so it's not the most financially like affordable.
They're
PhotoKite
crazy
probably
expensive, I've
is.
heard.
Yeah, they are. PhotoKite probably is the best one for that monitoring. I mean, I was out at a Kenny Chesney concert in Bozeman, Montana, at a college stadium, and they had the local agency had two vehicles out there with photokites as a overwatch for the stadium. I thought it was a great use case for them. They weren't flying over people; they were stationary, but they were able to use them as this extremely tall mast with cameras on it. I mean, that's really what it was used for. It's just a tall mast. So PhotoKite would probably be my go-to for that.
Yeah, I've seen them built into trucks and cars before. It's a really cool system to use. I think the one thing I'd ask of PhotoKite is for a better payload. I think that would make it a really great option.
Yeah.
Payload could definitely use a little bit of an improvement. It looks like the final question we have, unless anybody has some last minute questions, is it needed to take all permissions related of FAA if I want to demo my customized drone made outside of the US for BVLOS? Anybody have any thoughts on this?
I think a lot of that comes to, like, I guess, airframe regulatory stuff, which I don't know if anybody here is a big expert on that.
Yeah,
it's
I think
there's just so much to BVLOS. Like, it's not just the aircraft, right? It's the operation, it's the ConOps, it's where you're flying. So you can't just take a singular approach. I think if you're building a part of the solution, like, you need to, find good customers and use cases to prove out its safety. But it's hard to just take it.
It is a whole ecosystem.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that, like, anyone who's trying to build a drone today, it's a lot different than 2017, right? And, Part 107 assumes aircrafts fall out of the sky. And, Billy, your comment about a safe drone and, like, DJI is still 80% of the market share. So I think our data is skewed, in my opinion, on performance because DJI is that much advanced. I think there's a reality coming, especially for the Americans, when DJI isn't the dominant factor because of policies and regulations and whatnot, that maybe someone's views are going to change. I don't think we're going to go back to the day of GoPros falling out of the sky, but, I think we're going to take a step back. And I think this is where, like, if you're building a drone and you want to enter the US market, like, you got to understand what you got to build for tech, but you got to understand regulations. If you don't start with regulations, you're going to go down a bad path. And I guess my final note is, but Billy, you made a comment like safe drones today. I would argue we're actually moving towards less consumer, less off-the-shelf commercial, and we're actually trending towards more strict regulatory regimes for these drones. And if we look at, like, means of compliance, that's the FAA saying, pilots don't need to apply for waivers, put it on the manufacturer and put it on the parachute company, do all the paperwork so that you don't have to apply for waivers. And I think when we see Part 108, you're going to see maybe not DAL-C, DAL-D kind of aviation standards, but we're going to go to that kind of hybrid approach. And I would argue the industry is moving a race to the top of safety, and that requires aviation standards. Like, you talk to commercial drone delivery companies today, they hate the idea of meeting DO 178 for software assurance because they're like, that's crazy because that's not how people build, but that's traditional aviation and controls and being an understanding of how the aircraft was built. So I think this is where the trends are going to go towards more safety, more regulatory. And, people ask me, well, what does a drone look like without a parachute? Well, you better have a lot of test data. And I think that's where there's big opportunities for companies to improve safety by following more aviation standard practices and starting to look at DO 178, DO, I think it's 256 for the hardware, and looking at those kind of design assurance levels.
Awesome. Last minute question, guys, coming in here. Would you foresee the FAA accepting remote ID detection in lieu of radar, optic, et cetera, to satisfy BVLOS safety requirements? Any thoughts on that?
No, I don't think that remote ID is Bluetooth. Unless it was a network-based or ADSB, like an ADSB would get bogged down.
Yeah,
I mean,
remote ID is.
Yeah, if you look into some of the calculations that have to go in with just using regular sensors, minus live ADSB, if you have authorities for those, there's a lot that goes into them to give a pilot enough perception and reaction time to do a DAA maneuver, and remote ID wouldn't be able to do that.
And as David pointed out too, drone to drone is the least of the concerns, right? No one's getting a waiver based on drone to drone deconfliction. It's avoiding traditional aircraft first and foremost.
Yes.
Well, hey everybody! Thanks so much for watching. Everybody in the panel, thanks so much for jumping in here and giving your insights. Really appreciate it. And good luck today with the rest of the webinar. And hope you guys are learning some great stuff from all the speakers.
Thanks, Billy. Great job.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Billy. Good job.
See you, everyone.
Take care.